Please welcome Booking.com's Vice President of Global Segments, Olivier Grémillon, in discussion with Skift Travel Tech Editor, Sean O'Neill.
Hello. So Booking.com doesn't really need an introduction, but this is Olivier, who you previously were looking at overseeing the rentals division, but now you have a VP of global segments, and so you also have some other roles. You look at some of the hotel chain relationships, you look at new developments and new markets as well. But we'll be focusing on rentals here. We just had a very lively conversation about short-term rental regulation led by my colleague, Amy Hinote. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, maybe the first thing is, kudos to Brian for being on stage. I remember 9 years ago maybe, being on the other side at a hotel association annual meeting with basically 6 people on stage against me, plus the mayor was an unfriendly mayor as well. So I definitely feel for him today. I think the discussion was actually very good. I think, eventually everybody, a lot of great things have been said. When you are a hotel lobbyist, you are pushing, for the hotel, for your, clients in a sense. When you're a mayor, you want to be elected. And when you are in the short-term rental industry, you want the rules to be, as favorable to your business as they can be. Eventually, I think a lot of this is really common sense. Like, do we need regulation in some places about short-term rental? Yes, of course. Does having a level playing field means having exactly the same rules as the hotels? Not really. I remember one of the hotel CEOs once on stage told me, and we were talking about accessibility a minute ago, you guys you should have 1/11 of your rooms in an apartment who are accessible. And I'm like, do you really realize what you are talking about? Most of the apartments and villas don't have 11 rooms. So you can't have an 11th of your rooms who are accessible. Does it mean the industry should do nothing? No. But then I looked at the data, and in a city like Paris, for instance, I think the number was 1 every 7 rooms was accessible. Not because the owners did anything about it, but just because it was the way the apartments were built. So is the short-term rental industry respecting exactly this accessibility rule? No. But do they still respect the spirit of the law? Yes. So I think a lot of that, and a lot of the mayors are actually looking at it in a pragmatic way when they are not using the topic as a way to get elected, and basically saying let's have rules that make sense. And I think that, let's listen to all these lobbyists that come to see me, and let's make rules that actually make sense for my city.
Okay. One other point that came up in the discussion is whether it should be at the local level or not. I know you don't represent Booking.com's legal team, but you've also talked about these issues over your roles. Do you have a view?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. So I think I was told once by one of the homeowners that his village is like 500 people. And basically the mayor wanted to have access to all the data on how many people come to you when you rent your place and all that stuff. And his reaction, which I think was a fair one, was, I don't want to tell my mayor, who happens to be the guy who runs the shop next door, how many people come to my place, how much money I make every year, what do I rent, what do I sell on Craigslist, and whether I go on Tinder or not. Right. So I think, that's why I like in most cases something national, because it's actually, you take all of this into account and have something that is more, easier to implement. And for the platforms and everybody in this room, it's also easier when you have one rule instead of having 16 per cities, because everybody wants to push their own thing.
Okay. Let's talk about consumer interest and appetite for alternative accommodations. So Booking has a lot of data on this. What are you seeing as the trends? Are consumers hungry for alternative accommodations?
Yeah, so I think 2 things that we see. One is we do a survey every year that basically asks the question, would you be willing to rent a home or apartment next year? And the numbers go up every single time. I think the latest number is 37% of the people say, yes, I would rather actually rent a home or apartment versus a hotel next time. But I think the more interesting piece is you don't have, people believed at some point that you had the hotel guests on one side and the apartment guests on the other, and these were 2 separate populations. What we see more and more is it's actually not the case. There have been a bunch of research on this showing that people actually choose the type of accommodation based on their needs at that time. Mm-hmm. So people might be hardcore hotel bookers on business or when they go with their partner, But many people actually prefer to book a home or a villa when they go with their kids for 2 weeks. So I think that's what we see more and more. You don't have a villas booker on one side and a hotel booker on the other side. Most people are actually both. And that's how, that's reinforced a little bit the strategy we had at Booking, which is, and that now everybody has, which is let's have everything on the same platform because that's what the customers want. They want to be able to pick and choose. And many of them, and we see that in the data at Booking, when they arrive, even if they typed Hotel London on Google, they end up with home or an apartment just because they didn't know exactly what they wanted to begin with.
Okay. I want to pull on a couple of things that you just said there, but if maybe we can call the slide that has some of the data that Booking provided. So you mentioned consumers do have an appetite, and you said that they do want to have all the options. Booking has something like 30 different accommodation types. Yep. For several years now, consumers have been trained that if you want to get hotels, you go to a site that's like hotels.com or Hotels Tonight. If you want to get rentals, you go to like a Vrbo or an Airbnb. Booking is making the bet that the convergence is happening. Consumers want to have all of that, is what you're saying. But my understanding from marketing is if you give consumers more choice, if you give them 3 things, conversion's high, you start giving them 7 and they start confusing and conversion goes down as a classic rule. So how are you maintaining conversion rates when you're adding all this content?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I would just correct something, which is when people were looking for a hotel, in most cases, they were going to Booking.com, not the 2 other names you mentioned, just because we're bigger than the 2 of them combined. I think, yes, that's a good point, which is the more you actually give, the more choice you give to someone, the more you make their life difficult. The thing is, their life was already difficult to begin with. Again, there are a bunch of studies saying that people on average visit between 16 and 32 websites to actually plan their vacation. So they were already looking at all these websites and looking at different options already. So the fact that you have it on the same platform is actually an improvement because you say, no, you don't necessarily have to shop around. If you have everything on the same platform, that's better. One thing we are trying to do at Booking, and some of our competitors are doing as well, is how do we make the different property types what we call comparably different, meaning you try to make them comparable so that they appear in the same search results in the same way, like the page is similar, like the types of information you have is similar, but you actually highlight the differences. So, there are a bunch of examples. If you go on Booking today, you would see, potentially the size of the apartment you would rent, but you don't necessarily look at the size of the hotel room because the hotel room is pretty much the same size everywhere. If you have floor plans, it's actually interesting to have the floor plans of a 3-bedroom apartment. Not that useful to know that your hotel room is square or square. Like it's always kind of the same floor plan anyway. So I think there are some things like that where the website looks the same, but when necessary, we actually push some additional information that are more interesting.
So Booking.com always test and learn. You'll respond to whatever consumers are ready, but you have to have a hypothesis. So it sounds like your hypothesis is Booking.com and other players can really be assertive in like really pushing alternative accommodations to the top of sort because the consumers are ready and conversion's going to be okay. Is that broadly true?
So it's broadly true, meaning like we don't necessarily push anything. Like that's something that surprised me when I arrived at Booking, which is I thought I had to fight with what we call the ranking team, which is the one designing the algorithm to see what's on top and what's below, because I thought that I needed to buy some spaces up there with my homes and apartments. And they said, no, that's the same algorithm for everybody. It's just that there is some popular demand for this type of properties, and therefore they come up in the top of the ranking naturally. Not always, not everywhere, but when that's what the customers want. The conversion is high, so they come up at the top. I think one thing we try to do is to also show to each guest what makes more sense for them. So for instance, and not rocket science, but when you say I'm a business traveler, when you actually search and I'm staying for 2 nights and I'm alone, we are going to show you more hotels. When you say I'm looking for something for a week in a beach area and I'm with all my kids, we're going to show you more villas. So, and there is some personalization also based on what we know of you. If we know you've never booked a single room and you have had like 100 transactions with us, maybe we're not going to show you too many of them because the probability of you booking a home is not necessarily that high. On the other side, if we know that you like swimming pools, we're going to show you things with swimming pools. So that's where personalization can actually play a role on top of the normal algorithm that we have, which is basically based on conversion.
So the sort order isn't sort of magical. You guys do different tests in order to make it work. And so since September, since we started announcing that we were going to do this event, I've been comparing Expedia.com's homepage for like cities like Milan, where it's an urban market, compared to Booking.com. And Booking.com has been doing a lot of assertive pushing of alternative accommodations. I would see that in year over year, seasonally adjusted, and versus just a few months ago and now, like top 30 hotels that used to appear in a major European city, maybe pushing down. They're not getting as many eyes on property on the listings as before, and alternative accommodations are getting much more higher up, and it's mixed in with sort of like cheaper best-selling hotels. So Expedia, on the other hand, tends to have those same top 30-ish hotels that were there before are still there. So there's a difference in strategy there. You also have to talk in your role as VP Global Segments with a lot of hotel chains and companies. What do you say to the hotel chains to assure them that you're not throwing them under the bus when you're going to war with Airbnb on these listings?
Yeah, the main answer is what I just said, which is it's based on conversion and what people are looking for. So whether we show a home or not a little bit higher, first is because it converts. And second is even if we were not showing it, people would still book a home most likely somewhere else. So it doesn't really impact how many bookings you get as a hotel. I think the difference between the different providers, we've had homes and apartments since the beginning. I was actually looking at the data. Our first apartment on Booking.com was in the year 2000. So 19 years ago, even before Airbnb and others actually existed. And Expedia has a different strategy, which is they're actually inserting vacation rental listings into Expedia.com and Hotels.com. They started to do that a couple of years ago, and are pretty careful about how we do that. On our site, we have 28 million listing, 29 million, and we're actually all of that, the 6 point something million of vacation rentals and private accommodations have always been there, and then we just look at what people want, and if they want more home are actually showing up higher in the ranking.
That makes sense. So our reporting at Skift suggests that in the first quarter of this year, Airbnb is going to make a bigger push to try to get hotels onto their site and app. You used to work at Airbnb. Airbnb is a cooler brand. Millennials, according to surveys, they have a real strong brand affinity for it, especially in the United States. There's more of a contrast with Booking.com, which is seen as a bit more boring. How much of a headwind is it for you? Is being not cool not a headwind, a 10% headwind, a 30% headwind?
Yeah, I'll mention that to our new CMO when I come back to Amsterdam tonight, but saying you have some work to do on that side. No, so I think, let's be honest, Airbnb has built a brand in a pretty short amount of time that is actually pretty amazing, so kudos to them for having done that. I think the way we look at it is more than 50% of our bookings are actually coming direct. So it seems, some people still know what Booking is about, and they don't have to go necessarily to a search engine to discover that we exist. So I think we're doing a few good things on that side. Our point of view is we're not necessarily tailoring to one specific segment, like families or luxury travelers or people who want like local experiences or whatever. We want to be the website for everybody. So obviously it means that you are less specific to the millennials and others, but it doesn't mean that they don't come. I think why people come on a website like Booking is because it's very easy to use, for the prices and for things like that, and the selection that we have. Nobody has 29 million options to choose from. So it seems we have a relatively good mix there. Whether we have a coolest brand here or there, it's nice to be able to say that, but what I look at the end of the day is the bottom line and the top line that we generate, and it seems to be working quite well.
Okay. We have on the screen an example of one of the things that's newsiest for Booking.com. You have put quality rankings a couple months ago. I know Booking.com is always constantly testing things, but based on what you know now, do you feel like this is going to stay? This is probably permanent?
Yeah, so as you said, we are testing a lot of things. This is one of the things that we pushed a few months ago. I think the reason why we pushed that was just to solve a need. When you want to book a hotel, let's say like a luxury hotel, you go and you select on Booking or anywhere else, I want a 5-star hotel. When you want to do that in the vacation rental industry, there is not really a way to do that, whether you go to a very specific luxury website, but most of the time you don't necessarily have the choice that you need, what most people do is they look at the price and they put a high price. The problem is in the vacation rental industry, there is a higher correlation between a high price and a high occupancy than having luxury amenities. So that was something, and tell me if I'm wrong, I know a few of you actually gave me feedback already on this, but it seems that there was something where people wanted something a little bit more upscale than the normal villas or apartments didn't have a way to do it. So what we created here is basically, it's not a star system, it's not like the way the hotels do it, but we try to replicate it as much as we can, at least the philosophy of it. And then now when we are actually selecting on Booking, I want a 5-star, 4-star, 3 dots or whatever, you actually have both 5-star hotel and 5 tiles, I think that's what we call it, of vacation rental. So you have only luxury properties. And what we saw is the customer seems to love it. The property managers, I don't have too many calls, so it seems people are actually fine with it. And we tested it across different things. So for instance, you have some star systems in some countries like Croatia, like Germany, and a few others. And when we test it against an official rating that is pretty solid, in 90% of the cases, we actually have the same outcome as they do. So we have signals seems to say that it's good for the customers, it's good for the partners as well. So most likely we're going to continue with it. But and the technology behind it is actually pretty nice. Like I've mentioned that in the past, but we take into account different amenities depending on where you are. So for instance, in New York City, we know the apartments are most likely smaller than in North Carolina, as we mentioned earlier. So the size would be taken into account in a different way. We also know that air conditioning is more important in Miami than it is in Amsterdam, let's say. Mm-hmm. So the weight of having like air conditioning is much more important. If you don't have air conditioning in Miami, you won't be a 4 or 5 star. Right. If you don't have it in Amsterdam, you can be 4 or 5 star with no problem.
That makes logical sense. Just a reminder to the audience, we are taking audience questions through the Slido app. And if you like any of the questions you can give a thumbs up to them to make sure those are the ones that we're going to ask. I was at the Vacation Rental Managers Association conference. You were there. My colleague Amy Heinot was there. One of the things that really struck me when I was talking with property managers there in the professional space is Booking.com had like the best reputation, anecdotally speaking, for how well the account managers really listen to them, respond to them, and how quickly you guys have been trying to adapt and listen to them. And those changes have happened in the 3.5 years that you've been at Booking. So lots of companies talk about, they're going to listen to their customers. What's an example of something you did to sort of operationalize that so that the Booking team is very responsive?
Yeah, so the reason why we can do that is twofold. One is, if we look at the US alone, we have 23 offices only in this country, which is basically the number of offices some of our competitors have globally. So that makes a difference. Most of you in the room should have, if you're a property manager, you should have a key account manager that you know by first name and have their a mobile phone on speed dial. So that actually creates a connection that is more difficult to create if you don't have people on the ground. Mm-hmm. Our CS, our customer support agents, for the extreme majority are actually in-house agents. So they've been with us for many years, mm-hmm. and it actually helps to it's easier to train them with new things. I'm smiling a little bit because I'm looking at the first question on Slido.
So this was the first number one pain point was payments.
Yes.
When I talked to property managers.
Yes, so that's the one we're addressing. So without necessarily revealing anything, but we're working quite.
So let's ask the question.
Yes.
For people who can't see it in the live stream. So why is your payment system still so antiquated, where you send a screenshot of the credit card details? Most other platforms provide something seamless.
Yes. So there is a philosophical answer to this and a realistic one. The philosophical answer is we don't want to take payments for everybody. Like a lot of you are actually handling payments very well, and we are more than happy to let you handle payments yourselves. So we want to give a choice to our property managers, as well as people like you and me renting their place once in a while, to be able to go through our payment system or not. Can we do a better job, especially in the US, on this? Yes. So that's something we've been actively working on. I was actually with our head of payment on the phone earlier, and there are some improvements coming up, but it's definitely something that we heard loud and clear and that we are working on for sure.
Okay. You have said before you think it's good for the industry to have more data about what's going on because it helps everyone. So this next question from the audience is, you've said you've had more than 6 million short-term rentals. How do you define those when Booking.com talks about those? What percentage of those roughly are rented with regularity?
Yeah, so the way we define, so we have 29 million listings on the platform. 6.2 of them are actually in what we call home, apartments, and other places to stay. And the way we define the two is everything that is a hotel or looks like a hotel. So out of the 30 property types that you mentioned, 11 of them are actually hotels. So hotel, hostels, resorts, and all that stuff, we consider them as hotels. And then everything that is a villa, holiday home, an apartment, a ryokan, a riad, and all this stuff is actually considered like in this second category of non-hotel accommodation. So that's basically the way we actually separate the two. Everybody does slightly different. We try to have some kind of industry standards. If you look at Airbnb, for instance, they have 7 million listings, but it includes both hotels and non-hotels. So I think at some point we'll come with a definition for the industry that will make these numbers more clear. But that's the way we do it on our side. 11 hotel property types and 19 on the other side.
Okay, I'll give a shout out to Skift Research here, which has tried to do some benchmarking of that. So next question is there any talk about lowering the 15% commission? And as context, Booking has historically, with hotels, it's been a 15% commission, but if you're a major global chain, you're probably negotiating something down. On the rentals, it's been 15% without much wiggle room. Is that pretty much what it is?
Yeah, so we think that 15%, which is the global average that we have, for hotels, non-hotels, everybody, is actually a pretty fair commission level for the traffic that we send to our partners. The way Booking works is actually quite interesting, which is the vast majority of this we reinvest in marketing. So we are actually taking the money we make from this commission and reinvesting everything we have on top of a specific profitability. We reinvest that in the marketing that we can do. So we think 15%, especially when you compare to what is out there, which is very often much higher than 15%, if you add all fees, is a pretty fair number.
Okay, so I'm going to take the liberty as a moderator to go close with one final question that I didn't get to before, which is on the tech side. We've talked about your services for property managers. Are you going to be rolling out more tech services to help them do their jobs better?
Yeah, so twofold to this question. One is our strategy has been to be independent. We are a distribution platform, so we have no plans to buy a property management system. We have no plans to buy property management companies either.
Sorry,
so
everyone.
Sorry. If but I think the reason why I mentioned this is because we are pretty agnostic. We are not trying to push our own systems. We want to work with the people in the industry. But specific to your question, we have 600 connectivity providers, for instance, that we work with, whether property management system, channel managers, and others. So we spend a lot of energy there. And obviously, we have a benefit of having done that with the hotel industry for 20 plus years. So things we've done, for instance, is publish like a list of what we call VR Essentials, which is the key APIs that we have in our platform that actually every provider should have. And then we have some of you in the room who do much more than this, but at least the key APIs, the content APIs, the one on the reviews, reporting, and all that stuff are actually pretty key to be able to work properly with Booking. Mm-hmm. So we do that. We have also an advisory board where some of you actually are part of, where we actually continue to push on what is the next level in terms of technology. We did a hackathon 2 weeks ago, I think in Amsterdam, with some of you as well, just to actually see what is the next level in connectivity. So definitely a lot of investment there. Mm-hmm. Also because our we spend a lot of time. A lot of our bookings are with property managers, more on the professional side, on the customers, on the rent RBOs, which we call the rental by owners. So definitely, that's a big focus of us.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you so much for all of your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.